Hello, hi everyone. I'm really happy to see you all here to talk about this very important topic of biometric surveillance that, contrary to its importance, is not discussed much in the Slovenian public. So my name is Jasmina. I come from Danes je nov dan, a Slovenian NGO, where we work on the intersection between democracy and technology. I have two great colleagues with me today. So they're going to speak more about their national context. So on my left is Leila Belhadj Mohamed. She works for an Italian organization called Privacy Network. She's a journalist, researcher, trans-feminist activist with an expertise in Mediterranean geopolitics, migration and digital rights. And then on my right is Sebastian Kneidinger. He's a policy advisor at an Austrian organization, epicenter.works, where he works on data protection, biometric surveillance, AI, and regulation. So you're going to hear more from them and about more specific cases, and I'll just do a short introduction into the topic first to give you more of a global overview of the situation. So our aim today is to discuss biometric surveillance and to answer the questions what this actually is, who benefits from the surveillance and who loses, how does this affect our collective rights, and hopefully also we're going to discuss what can we do to prevent any harmful outcomes. There's a question popping up that if our public services and governance should be about humans and our humanity, then what happens when this is guided by technology and algorithms? So we're going to try to kind of answer that question. Let's see. And another thing that I would like to point out is that 9/11 events in the US were a big push for these type of surveillance tools, and this global push for more securitization. So I think is very telling that we are discussing this topic today on the 11th of September. So what actually is biometric surveillance? It uses biometric identification tools. Those are the tools that use our biometric data, which is our voice, our iris, so in Slovenian that's šarenica in the eye, our gait, which is hoja, and then specifically our face, this is more the most famous one, to identify us for various reasons. This could be basically for comparing our face to just like to a database of faces to see if we are really matching, like the passport checkup, but can be also used for any like various different reasons. And we will today mostly discuss facial recognition, but then also other tools of surveillance. And facial recognition has two main applications. One I just mentioned is comparing one face to one image, just to do the matching. This is what you all have on your phones, I would assume, to unlock it with your picture. But then the more concerning one is the one where it's comparing one picture to many other pictures. So this form is commonly used by law enforcement, by intelligence agencies, and also by private companies for surveillance. And these type of tools are typically justified on the ground that they're actually aiding fighting crime and terrorism, and are used either in policing context, for example, to find a suspect of a crime, or in border control to combat so-called illegal migration, and then also in counter-terrorism. And these, supposedly they are being helpful, even though there's very minimal or almost no data proving this, that they're actually deterring or preventing crime from happening. But the more important part for us is that they also grant the state historically unprecedented powers towards the individuals. So this type of control was never really possible without these type of tools. They also have a great potential to reinforce already existing power dynamics in our society. So people that are vulnerable and marginalized are going to be more vulnerable and marginalized because of these tools. They automate discrimination in decision making, and they amplify the control over certain populations. And this is not just happening on the borders where we maybe know more about it, but it's also happening in the cities now, because the so-called, we call them digital borders. They moved from the borders to actually to the whole areas of the states, and the unprecedented data gathering with this type of tools is actually happening. So we have a couple of recent implementations of these type of tools that are showing potentially the dangers of these technologies. Most famously, probably you're aware that Israeli army is using such biometric surveillance and identification tools in Palestine. So specifically in West Bank, IDF soldiers are using an app on their mobile devices to scan people passing the checkpoints and to basically collect as much data as possible on Palestinians, to then later use it for control, to stop them, to prevent them to access some certain roads or schools, or give them permits, and to arrest them, and of course target them for killings like we've seen in Gaza. And we could think that Israel is just another oppressive state, and it's normal in quotes, that it's actually doing this, because this is what bad guys do. But we've seen similarly worrying trends also happening in Europe. So for example, Hungary is another case where they used live facial recognition tool at the Budapest Pride Parade. But then we also have countries like Cyprus, Greece, and Spain, where authorities have tested and deployed AI-powered systems to monitor migrant movements. And we heard in the discussions before that there are many, many tools like that used also within European context. And these are not isolated cases. There is a global push to use these advanced technologies to control and target more vulnerable communities, but this can quickly trickle down to any other person. And the underlying assumption is always the same. So the technology is very efficient and is neutral, and then more surveillance like this will potentially equal more safety. But instead of investing money in actual solutions for these big societal problems, we should just be throwing money at the tech, at big firms that are developing tools, and then maybe something will stick and we will kind of happily solve all of our problems. But of course, yeah, that's an assumption, but we actually here don't think that's true. And another thing that's going on is like amid all the global shift towards far right and authoritarianism, there are clear indications from the oppressive governments, but also more liberal governments, if we can call them like that, that these tools are already used and are going to be more used in the future to harm our rights, regardless of any fairness or any accuracy of the results. We will hear more about that from Leila and Sebastian in a bit. And then the third thing that I would like to point out, there's also a big push from the industry and the decision makers to actually change the focus of our debates from questioning such tools to and their use to and the ethics of these tools to this techno-solutionism kind of mindset where we are just merely fixing any technological issues. So if there's one tool was discriminating, that's just a tech issue. We're just going to fix the algorithm a bit, and then it's going to be good, and we can then continue to use it. So yeah, the techno-solutionism is saying we're going to fix our problems with the tech. And these problems usually in biometrics is crime prevention. But in the human nature is that when the tool is saying this, you should do this is the suspect, or this is the correct outcome, people usually just blindly follow that outcome, and the states are usually saying, oh, but we have people that are verifying the results of these tools. So if you're identified by an automated tool, usually police is going to check that, but we are kind of aware that when the tool says, yes, this is the target, or this is the suspect, humans are just going to follow those orders. So there's a lack of accountability and oversight happening, which we discussed already before. And this highlights even further the necessity for more responsible use of the tools and for more good principles and legislation. But these tools are not so they're not just like a digital infrastructure that are making our countries more modern, because EU is pushing us to invest more money into such tools, so we don't want to be left behind, so we're buying more and more tools and then making more and more mistakes. Like I've pointed out before, these are the tools of instruments of power, and they are shaped by our political, economic, and social context. And they usually just replicate what's already bad in our societies. So when they are deployed in the areas of policing and border, and we're going to discuss this in a bit, they just further criminalize the people that are already on the margins. So we think that, and why we're starting this debate in Slovenia, is that these type of tools are not just like individual issues. So it's not just about us personally, how we can avoid surveillance systems when it's deployed on the street, but it's more of a societal issue. And it's basically a political crisis that really demands our actions as a civil society and also legislative interventions. So I'll just stop here with, I hope this helped you to understand what we're going to be discussing, and I'll pass over to my colleagues. And I think, Sebastian, you're going to go first.
I think the mic is on. Thank you so much, Jasmina. Thank you so much, Danis Jenovdan. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Super nice to have an exchange here in Ljubljana, in such a nice city, interesting exchange. And I'm really glad to talk shortly about the situation in Austria. So I'm going to talk mostly about facial recognition, which is already happening in Austria. As Jasmina pointed out, everybody thinks about, Hungary or China, where there's a lot of surveillance going on. But it's also happening in Austria. I think we're still having some struggles with the slide, but that's no problem, because my first slide would have been
I've put the worst person behind the computer. It's my bad.
I'm just going to use the time to give you some information about my organization. We're called Epicenter.works. We're based in Vienna. We started out already 15 years ago. We were founded as an association against surveillance. And over time, we expanded. So we're working on a national level. We work on a European level, but also international level regarding UN conventions, for example. So we also have a lot of information out there that might be of interest for you. So please visit our website, epicenter.works. We also have a newsletter in English bi-weekly. So just drop by if you're ever interested. And so I'm going to start now, I think, without the slides. So firstly, I just want to talk a bit, what is facial recognition? It's just a big word, and everybody thinks, oh, it sounds so technical. Well, it is technical, but the principles behind it are very, very basic. So firstly, you always need a camera. You mostly need a lot of cameras everywhere. Why? You need to capture a lot of faces. So that's why a lot of police in Austria are pushing now for more pictures, for more cameras to take pictures. The next thing that you need is artificial intelligence. So a few years ago, we just called it a basic algorithm, but now we're using artificial intelligence. That means sometimes that thing is learning really on itself. Oh, bravo. Thank you, Maya. So I think I would be on slide 3 now. Yeah, how facial recognition works. Basically, it's capturing the face of a person, and then you create a face print. And at this stage, you normally use artificial intelligence. And the next step afterwards is to match that face print with all the other faces that you already have in your database. So just remember, we need a camera, we need AI, we need a database. Yeah.
And we need a tech person to come help Maya. Sorry.
No problem. Perfect. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide. Perfect. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the key concerns in Austria. So as I said, you need a lot of cameras to take pictures. Otherwise, it's not useful to have facial recognition. So it has a push effect for the police to put cameras everywhere. And we saw that happening just 1 month ago. In August, our Ministry of Interior proclaimed that we're going to expand heavily the public surveillance in Austria. We're going to use it on a lot of places where we didn't have public surveillance before. And also, what does that make? Cameras everywhere, it makes a chilling effect for everybody. It's not only about privacy, but a lot of people, they tend to not go to demonstrations when they know they're being filmed, they're being watched. It's a chilling effect for freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. I talk a lot about this chilling effects in Austria on public discourse and so on. And there's always one person who tells me, oh, this chilling effect, that sounds so esoteric. Sebastian, shut up. You know, this chilling effect is considered by the Austrian Constitutional Court. The Austrian Constitutional Court, when it talks about public surveillance, always considers that chilling effect. We know that from a lot of psychological studies, when people know that they're being watched, they behave differently. And I don't know, maybe it's a question to answer for yourself. What do you think if you go to a demonstration, you know there are a lot of cameras, you know that your picture will be stored forever? Maybe you think twice to go there. And I think especially, sorry to say, in Eastern Europe, there's more sentiment in that regard to remember what's happening. And that's exactly what happened, for example, now in Budapest. So the next thing that's super problematic is the AI that's being used. There are 2 topics currently going on. A, the legal basis for the use of AI in Austria for facial recognition stems from over 10 years ago. At that point of time, we didn't have that powerful AI that we have at the moment. That sort of AI is so new. And I don't know whom of you works in IT or has a small company that uses IT. Everybody knows when you use IT, you need to think about quality management. You need to think about risk management. Each and one of us needs to consider what impact does software have. Why is our state not doing that? That's what we ask for. We're not saying, oh, ban everything, but we say, well, please consider in the laws appropriate risk measures so we don't have the outcome that we had. Because 3 years ago, there was a case where the police thought they would have identified somebody with facial recognition. They issued an international arrest warrant, and this person was arrested on its holidays in Serbia. The person was detained for 2 months. And it turned out it was a mismatch. The AI just didn't work. They had a score of 80% that this was the right person, but it just was not true. So that's why we ask for risk and quality management, because as it turns out, that has real-life effects. We're not talking about theoretical effects. That's already happening. And the funny thing was, there was a lot of discussion regarding the case in Austria, but there was no push in law to change anything. So, and the last topic here is the database. We currently have a database in Austria that stores the pictures of over 600,000 persons. That's about 8% of the population. I think that's excessive. Normally, such a database should include only high-risk persons or persons who already did something. But to think that 8% of all persons living in Austria would be accused of a heavily crime, it's absurd. And also here the problem is the laws. They're antiquated, they're super old, but the police is still relying on it. And that, of course, raises questions of proportionality and data protection. We have data protection laws, especially to help us fight against this overreach, and that's why we have a big issue with the database. So you hear a lot of complaining from my side, but on the next slide, I'm going to show you what we're doing at the moment. So we lodged a complaint with the Austrian Data Protection Authority. The background is there was a climate protest in Vienna in 2023, and the police reacted a bit heavily. They detained 130 activists, and that was a highly controversial measure. It was also big in the media, politicians were talking about it, and it turned out those people, because you have to accuse them of something to detain them, none of them ever got a day in court because they knew the prosecutors, we don't have a case here. But one young man, he said, oh my God, that's too excessive. I'm just exercising my right to assembly, my right to protest. Why am I being detained? And that's why he told the police, well, I'm not going to identify myself. So the police just took a picture and didn't tell him that they would use facial recognition on him. And luckily, that activist is acquainted with us, he's aware of us, and then he reached out to us. And he was one of the first cases where we had paper documentation that facial recognition was used on a person. Because quite often people do not become aware that facial recognition is used on them. That's a big topic. So it was the first time that we had it in paper. Oh my God, they use facial recognition. And we are the legal representatives for him. We lodged a complaint with the Data Protection Authority because actually there is similar to the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, directive for the use of or directive for data protection in police and justice. And they actually have some quite detailed groundings how you can use data in the context. And we see it in such a way that how they currently use facial recognition is against that directive. So the case is still pending. We just handed it in a few months ago. We're still waiting on the outcome. We're also, to be honest, a bit curious how the first instance is going to decide, because I can imagine there's a lot of pressure from politicians to not rule in our favor. So we will see. So that's a broad overview of the Austrian situation, and I think we can talk in detail a bit more afterwards.
Thank you, Sebastian, and I'll just pass it to Leila.
Thank you for inviting us. As Sebastian said before, I think that we need more events like this throughout Europe just to know that how we are facing the same problems, if there is the same problem in every country. As you said before, I come from Italy, which has a lot of problems, actually, for what concerns surveillance, mass surveillance, and the use of facial recognitions. The first case was in 2016, even if it was not so huge, and it was the testing of this technology inside stadiums. So I'm not entering right now all the things about political oppositions or migrants. It was inside stadium. So every person who entered the stadium in Rome had to pass through this system that recognized the person and only exposed, so not in real time. If there was something happening inside the stadium, they could make the recognition. This kind of project was tested also in other stadiums, in Naples, in Udine, and in March 2025 in Milan. I think that the one in Milan, it's really tricky because actually the previous cases happened before even there is any kind of legislation at a European or at national level on the using of facial recognition. But right now we have it, and actually our Data Protection Authority in 2021 said that there is the system that the police using, which is called SARI. It's the acronym of Automatic System for Image Recognition. And you have the enterprise one that is ex post and the real-time one. We have a moratorium that it's going to end by the end of this year. So actually you cannot use this kind of systems in Italy, but they are still testing it in stadium.
Let me just cut you there for a bit, because I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of the difference between the post and real time.
Yeah, of course. Like ex post, it means that if something happens in a specific space in the city, the police has the possibility during the investigation to use this system, and the authorities said that the police is allowed to use it to check inside this huge database the images taken during the protest, for example, during the, I don't know, the crime, okay, for example, and they can match the images. Real time, it means that you have a lot of cameras in the streets, and in live, in real time, they kept kept images, and they send it to the central headquarters of the police of the specific city, and they in real time, while maybe you are just drinking coffee outside in the street, they can match your image with their database. And then this is not allowed, of course, in this specific moment, so this is the difference. And we have discovered, thanks to a colleague of mine, that he discovered in 2021 that he was inside the Clearview database. What is Clearview? It's a huge American society that collect images of people also from social media, so violating the guidelines of social media, and sell it to countries. And we discovered that Italian police is using Clearview, so we don't know actually how big is the database of the police in Italy. We also have another level, another layer of problem, because you have the SARI, which is the database of the images, and AFIS, which is the database of the fingerprints. And in this specific moment, we know that the Italian police has the the biometrical data from the criminal record, but also the migrants. So if you have a resident permit, I mean, I'm not speaking only about like refugees, but if you have a resident permit and you didn't commit any kind of crime, you are inside the same database of people that had committed crime. And we are asking through FOIA, like access of Act, if people, when they get the citizenship, are still inside these databases or not, and we don't have the answer, because the Interior Ministry of Italy, it's famous to not answer to journalists and associations when we ask questions. So we have really a lot of layers of how like mass surveillance is spreading in Italy. And I think another stuff that we have to underline is that everyone is focusing on like cutting the funds to not spend a lot of money. But if you see how the budget for defense and the Interior Ministry has increased in Italy in the last 3 years, we know that a lot of money is focusing on drones, AI, automatic defense weapons, and quantum for what concerns the defense ministry. But if we are seeing for the Interior Ministry, they are investing 31 billion euro only this year for surveillance, video surveillance, cams throughout the streets, cams that can capture the number of the plate of the cars. So, and also to make a new agreements with the municipality to use this kind of to train this kind of project of facial recognition in the city. Of course, the reason is always security. We don't have any proof right now that using this kind of technology, if there is security or not. We don't have. For example, you in Austria have the case of this guy. Right now, we don't have any case, in the sense we don't have any proof of like unfair trial because of facial recognition right now. But we are investigating on how the fact that people are inside these databases, even if their criminal record is clear, they don't get citizenship because they protest in the streets. And we are going back to what Sebastian said before. If you know, if you are a person with a resident permit, if you are not a citizen, and you know that if you are like, if your photo is inside this database, and the fact that you protested, it's not getting you allowed to have the citizenship, you are not enjoy your constitutional right to protest. So really the layers are a lot, and from a country new for the G8 of Genoa in 2001, seeing this increasing use of these mass surveillance tools by the police officers and etc., it's really scaring actually.
Thank you so much to both of you. We'll just continue with a short discussion that I'll have a couple of questions we're going to discuss, and then we're going to open the floor for your questions also. So I think I'll just, like, whichever one wants to start first, I'll just pose a question. What you both mentioned is that there's a lot of investment in these type of tools. So there's a big push from the EU. There's a lot of money going into such tools, not just like used in policing, but also like military budgets. There's a big discussion in Slovenia regarding this. And this is all taking money away from somewhere. So it's taking money away from social security, from schools, from health systems, from all the stuff that's already underfunded. So I think this is like a big issue, and like the industry, of course, wants to earn more and more money. So how are we protecting our like communities and our public services? And then on the one hand, like you mentioned, we hear that AI tools and all this is going to actually help us save the money and to make the systems more efficient. So supposedly we're going to use less money, but then, yeah, like you said, we were discussing before, there's more military and more police on Italian streets and more tools being used. So this kind of doesn't make sense. Any thoughts on this? Like, what do you think? Like, maybe the situation's like different, or?
Yeah, this is like the elephant in the room, because of course, like the budget is on the table and they have to choose where to put it. We are seeing in Italy, as I said, 31 billion to the Interior Ministry and 32 billion to the defense. So it's $63 billion to all what is like enforcement, okay? But we are seeing cutting in schools. They are like reforming the high school exam to don't let teachers stay in summer, so you can cut some fund to the Ministry of Education. We have a huge problem in the health system. We don't have nurses, we don't have doctors, we don't have, I mean, our health system is completely falling down. We know that NATO are asking us to invest more. Our government tried to put like the building of some infrastructure inside the NATO, spending money. You know, Salvini want to build the bridge, and he said, "Oh, this is defense." But then, like 2 days ago, Washington said you cannot like use NATO money to build the bridge that connect Calabria with Sicily. This is a long Italian story and drama. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how to answer to this question, in the sense that we know also that, I don't know in your countries, but in ours, like the monopoly of the production of weapons is under Leonardo. Leonardo, it's a huge enterprise, but it's also a public one. It's connected with the Ministry of Economy, so it's like a cat, you know, beating their own. I mean, it's really complicated. And how can we protect our communities? I think this is even more complicated, because a lot of our communities are not aware of this, of the using of this tool on them. I'm thinking about the LGBTQIA+ movement in Hungary, but also in Italy. I'm thinking about all the minorities that are affected by the controlling of this kind of tools. Every time I speak about it, I always put the example of Iran, of Russia, but it's in our cities. I mean, we didn't mention UK, but it was the first one in 2017 with gang metrics arresting teenagers only because they are racialized, and the 70% were innocent. I mean, it's not like the worst dictatorship ever. It's the liberal democracy of UK. I mean, but if you say in Moscow they arrested protesters because they enter in the metro with the biometrical data, and they collected of the picture and they went house by house arresting them, people said, oh, okay, but it's Putin. Yes, but it's everywhere. I mean, and right now we are in democracy. Who knows what's going to be like in 2, 3, 50 years, you know, or days, who knows? I mean, there is a quote that said, if you have a gun on a table, on a stage, that gun is going to be used. That's the same. I mean, if we put the possibility to use these tools, it will be used. But I'm not so optimistic, actually. I don't know how like it would be useful. I mean, I don't know how can we protect our communities, and especially if we don't, we have to find a way to put who is wrong accountable, in the sense someone suggests that that specific person did something and he was like mismatched, someone has to be accountable for this, but no one is accountable. This is, I think, the first step.
I think that the question of accountability is super important, because if I use those tools, I also have a responsibility. And I think that's the big issue that I have at the moment, that it seems to me there's not the awareness that the proper installment and use of such powerful tools, you need dedicated persons who do quality and risk management. You need the know-how. That's not easy to get. And I think what we're asking for is something super basic. That's a super basic principle. But if it happens that you apprehend somebody for 2 months and there's not a kind of reckoning, I really ask myself, what is going on here? And we have a kind of a different situation. The budget crisis is a topic everywhere, but in Austria we have the situation that they actually closed down for 1 or 2 years some provincial police schools. So we know that in some Austrian provinces we won't have enough police people on the street, and that's why they're gonna try to use more surveillance. And the issue that we have with biometric surveillance, it's more that idea, that kind of showing of politicians, oh, we're gonna do something. We are effective. You see it everywhere, the cameras, and then you think I'm safer. But is it really safer? Is that really scientifically based security policy? I don't think so. I think it's more just kind of an Potemkin village to make you feel safe, maybe also make you feel a bit threatened, so you don't go to a demonstration or whatever. And that's what is annoying me the most, because kind of often you're getting depicted when you work in that kind of sphere, oh, you're against any measure by the police, and that's not true. What I'm asking for is a good balance that I think everybody's striving for. You know, I want to have a secure state, but also a state that enables a demonstration, a state that enables a good democratic discourse. And I think what we're seeing here at the moment is not responsible ways of treating AI. It's hype, it's push from some industry actors, as you mentioned, there's a lot of money into it. And I think everybody should be a bit more critical and ask themselves, what is it doing to the society as a whole? Does it make us that much more secure? I don't think so. But you feel surveilled, and it's getting more normalized. And you know, they're getting 1 inch and then they're taking the next inch. And the next thing that you're gonna have is automated courts for some small dealings or whatever. So I think we really have to think about where we're gonna tell the state to stop, and that's up to us. And I think it's up to us to also bring the awareness to politicians, to make yourself heard. We're a bit more lucky in Austria. We have kind of civil society that has an ongoing discourse on questions of privacy. I think that's also different in different states of the EU. And that's the question, how we're gonna tackle it. But because when it comes down to, as you mentioned it, it's an European question. Those movements are pan-European, and it doesn't help if you have a bit better situation in this country and a worse situation in this country. When it comes down to, especially with the new policing going on from Frontex, whatever, there needs to be a pan-European push, or it's not going to happen.
Yeah, all this makes me think that the governments are kind of trying to persuade us that, oh, but you don't have anything to hide, so why are you worried? If you're like a good citizen, it's not about you. We're just trying to catch some criminals or some like illegal people like moving the borders. But like based on the stuff that you mentioned, like all these cases, that's obviously not true. And also what you just said now, we don't know what's gonna be, what's legal today or what's acceptable today can quickly be illegal, like, yeah, in 5 days or in 50 days or whatever. So it makes me think about like, okay, if we don't care about this stuff now, but how about our future? So is there gonna be a future scenario where you're gonna cross the road and you just gotta automatically get a ticket, a fine at your address because you're gonna be your face is gonna be recognized, you crossed the road on the wrong spot, so this is just gonna be like all this pressure, so you are gonna be like limiting yourself on what you're doing. And there are already groups in our societies that are doing this. So there's like this information panic among certain groups of people that are already trying not to engage in like state or city services because their data is always being used against them. They are not going to the protest because if they're going to go to the protest, maybe they're not going to get the citizenship. So like if we think as like white people here in like developed world, wherever, that we are now safe, but like the experience should teach us that this is not always the case. So I think that we need to discuss like what can we do about this? So how can we prevent such like horrific scenarios continuing? Like maybe the question is also, how can we as a civil society do something about this? How important is a civil society in this type of discussion, building awareness, putting pressure, always keeping an eye on stuff? So I know it's a long, again, one of those long questions. So whichever part you want to answer. Or just share any thoughts, like any thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the role of civil society is central, actually. And we have, as European civil society, tried to unite more and to get the space. I think our generation, I think in difference with the previous, are trying to do it, but we are not effective, as much effective as the previous generation, in the sense that I don't think that we are strong enough, even if we are trying. And I think this is what we have to do. We have to keep trying, to keep collaborate, not only inside our single country, but at a European level. We have to involve all this marginalized group and try to get the space. We have to be in the streets, we have to be in schools, we have to be only in the public spaces. And there are someone between us that are much stronger, so they have to be like the caterpillar opening the streets for everyone. I think that we don't have to gatekeep our connections. We have to share more and more, because we are really in a turning point in history. And I think that the last 2 years, with all the protests throughout Europe for what's going on in Gaza, but also what's going on in Ukraine, but also what's going on in Sudan, I mean, the global situation is really not so good. We have seen that there is a huge civil society, and we have to find a way to reach this civil society, to let them increase awareness about this topic, because everything is interconnected. And I think that only at that moment we will be strong enough to oblige the power to listen to us. Because I know in some countries it's easy to speak with the institutions. In our country, my country, it's not. I mean, it's easy to speak with them, but the problem is that they don't listen. They were like, "Oh, thank you for all the suggestions, amazing drafting law," and then they push it like in the rubbish. So, as a European Union, we have to be like to remember like the original idea of a pan-European movement, you know. And I know it's not easy, and it's not easy at all, because there are a lot of differences, there are a lot of issues. But I think this is the only road that we can walk to really do something good. It's not easy, it will be long, but we don't have to give up. So I think this is like the most important things that the civil society should do in this specific moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Leila. I think the same. And there's one special aspect that's really bothering me all the time, because when we talk about those topics like biometric surveillance, already the word itself is like so complicated and weird. And I see the main issue, it doesn't matter with whom you talk about it, is to take away fear. Because everybody think, oh, it's technical, and then it's legal, and then you hear AI, so I can't talk about it because it's so complicated, and then I make a fool of myself. And it's not true. I think a lot of people have a good gut feeling, they feel it in their stomach, what's happening here. And you just have to speak out. You don't have to be a professional to speak out. And we see that also with a lot of politicians, to be honest, that they're kind of afraid to speak out, to say something wrong. And that shouldn't happen, only because it's technology or it's legal stuff. you should be able to speak out. And also what we see is like to give sometimes as a civil society a course correction and say, we also see that sometimes politicians or the ministry, they're just trying to make the country better and more secure, and they think, oh, we need to do this, we gotta do this. If we don't use AI, we're getting lost in the AI race and whatsoever, and just speak out and say, no, that's bullshit. Like, stop and think, consider what we expect from the state is like accountable, transparent, and reasonable, proportional ways of policing, but not those things that are happening at the moment that quite often isn't even working. And that's also sometimes weird for us because we take a middle-of-the-road approach and try to be of kind of a service just to correct the discourse a bit. Because the discourse sometimes is so absurdly skewed. You feel like a lot of your counterparts, they feel they're being pressured by whomever. And I think now it's the time to say stop. We should have a discussion as a whole of the society, what we want to do. We are not like the victims of some tech oligarchs, wherever they may be.
We're talking a lot about the civil rights, so the right to protest, the right to like free movement, the right to privacy. But we haven't touched on, I think it's a very important topic, and maybe you, Leila, can shed a light on it, is also what's already going on for these rights and these discussions that are not maybe so much in the public. So the issue, the tools used on the borders, and then also the tools used against journalists and more like activists or like people that are doing the civil disobedience. I think with the rising protests, and I think Slovenia went through like a couple of waves of big protests, but we didn't have such tools in Slovenia. We still supposedly don't have them, but like maybe our future is getting like with what's going on with the countries around us. So what you two mentioned, we are maybe also going towards that scenario. So if you can just speak a little bit about that, that would be, I think, great.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Well, it's what they call smart borders, in the sense that, like in the last 10 years, I will mention 10 years specifically because 10 days ago was the 10th anniversary of the death of Alan Kurdi. I don't know if you remember. It was the famous picture of this Syrian refugee baby death on the beach in Lesbos. Died trying to reach Lesbos with his family. In that specific moment, Italy, and not only Italy, started to a different approach in saving humans throughout the Mediterranean. And then Frontex came. And the way that European Union, and especially the border countries, so Spain, Italy, Cyprus, Greece, but also all the country borders on the Balkan route and the Canary route and France and UK have completely changed the way to save people in the Mediterranean and trying to stop people walking throughout Europe. So we have seen an increasing use of drones, especially in the Mediterranean Sea, both from Israel, drones that have been tested on Palestinians for decades. We have seen the using of cam with facial recognition and like the temperature recognition to see, like the ones that normally is used to check animals in the woods are put in the border here between Italy and Slovenia, in Trieste, Gorizia, Ugovica, etc., like to stop migrants to walk throughout like the border between Slovenia and Italy. And the same happens between Italy and France in Ventimiglia and Bardonecchia, where people are dying on the Alps. And the craziest thing is that there is the police. I mean, police brings journalists to testify what's going on, and they let people pass in the snow and not let them take a car to pass the border. So there is this using of technology also on La Manica, the Manica channel between France and UK. And we have seen with like the exchange, the changing of the immigration law at the European level, an increasing of the using of facial recognition on migrants, because on one hand we have the AA Act that tried to protect the data, the biometrical data of Europeans, but on the other side we have the Immigration Pact that allowed authorities to collect biometrical data of children from 6 years up. So it's also against any international treaty to the protection of children. So, and Eurodac, which is this huge database, European database of asylum seeker. So I think that the big mistake of Italy, of course, because I mean we are like the leading country in this kind of situation, is the externalization of borders, dealing with militias in Libya, in Tunisia, in Egypt, and in all like the country that have to stop migrants before that we even see them in the streets or dying in the sea. And the fact that they put like the migration issue inside the security issue. So something that it's systemical, because like we also migrate. I mean, I don't know Slovenia, but in Italy we have the like the opposite problem. It's not the immigration, but the emigration, especially of youth, inside the security system. And yeah, and another tool, which is not really... No, it's also connected actually, because I don't know if you have heard about the Paragon solution scandal. It's this spyware that governments can buy from this Israeli, again, enterprise. But this enterprise, in differences with the Pegasus one, which was in 2019, if I remember well, they were sell it also to private enterprises. Paragon sell it only to countries, and there are at least 100 victims throughout Europe. The only ones that, I mean, say openly that have been targeted are some Italian journalists and Italian activists from Mediterranean Saving Humans, so one of the NGOs trying to save people in the Mediterranean Sea, and journalists. So we have another layer of like surveillance. So the fact that some governments use spywares to spy journalists and activists. And of course, this is another layer of, I mean, when the journalists are attacked and when journalists are not free, I mean, the democracy is in crisis, because normally we should be the watchdog of the democracy. And we are not doing our job very good. This is another TED talk. But this is the problem. I mean, in an interconnected world where especially journalists in Europe work all together, I work with journalists throughout Europe. If I'm spied, they are also being spied. So like, it's really like a waterfall of mass surveillance. So this is also another kind of tool. It's not connected to biometrics, but it's another tool that is using, right now, we know that in Italy we had this problem. We know that our government had spied journalists and activists, even they are denying it. But we discovered that, yeah, it is. So, yeah, everything is optimistic today. I'm sorry.
Thank you. At this point, I would just like to, if you're willing, open the floor for any questions for you, public. If you have also any thoughts, any like ideas, maybe how we can do better as a civil society, also you're welcome to comment, not just ask.
Can you maybe comment upon the biometric data that is collected, used, abused, but doesn't have the usual biometric protections? For example, gait recognition. I read an article a couple of days ago that gait recognition is becoming more adopted, even though the police and other law enforcement doesn't even have to go through the usual checks and balances as they do with facial recognition. Can you maybe discuss that as part?
I mean, the thing, I try to answer it a bit. I think the problem in itself, biometrical recognition, you don't always need the face. You can use already the movement or some other abstraction of the body whatsoever. And I think that's the problem, that it's just going to expand. And when it comes down to it, for me, the human rights issues are basically always the same. As Leila just said, there's quite often a lot of bias. We know that in many situations, the AI has, for example, issues when people have darker skin. And women. Leila, maybe do you want to talk a bit?
Yes, there is these issues, and also there is this discourse about so we should train more and more and more, and we have to collect more and more, because there are a lot of biases inside, especially facial recognition, and we discovered a lot during the pandemics. For example, in Italy, the Data Authority the Data Protection Authority blocked one university on the use of proctoring, which is a kind of facial recognition to like trying to understand during like the online exams if someone was cheating or not, and the highest level of false positive were on racialized people. So you have a lot of especially black people had to put a lot of light on their faces to try to not get the false positive. We know that there is a lot of bias on women. We know there is a lot of bias on non-binary and trans people. So the problem is like you don't have 100% correct answer. So even if we put the ethic and the human rights, which is like our center of our discourse apart, it's even if everyone is different, I agree. But the problem is like maybe you can be recognized correctly and someone else no. I didn't get recognized, for example, at the airport of Athens with the biometrical passport, and I had to be double checked because for them maybe I was like too curly and in the picture I was not. So this is another layer of problem. The false positive or the false negative, but this is inside also the technical world is the discourse like to eliminate the biases we have to collect more pictures of racialized people, but I don't know if it's like how did you collect these pictures? This is also a question, you know.
And I think the problem is as well that AI really has an effect of people. So if you're a person that is working at the airport and the AI tells you, that's the output, that's the information, it's really hard to disagree with it. That's the main problem, because everybody thinks, they're so much more capable than me, that's a good system designed by super intelligent people. So it makes a push of humans to not really interact with the information. And that's a big problem. Is there a human in the loop? Maybe, but even if there is a human in the loop, are you willing to disagree with it? And you should have people that disagree with it, because you will always have false positive, false negative, whatever. And that's a bit the problem at the moment with the hype going on, because everybody thinks, we'll be so much more effective, it's so much cheaper, but they're not considering, if I want to use that stuff, I also need the right IT guys who are able to train it, who are able to disagree with it, who are able to monitor it.
Just to answer then to your question, you were talking about gait, right? So it's basically a biometric data. So gait is the way every person walks. So each one of us walks a bit differently. So this is also a data that is collected by certain systems. It scans how you walk, and then it can identify you based on that. So that's also part of, so it's the same as facial recognition. So they can use your face, or they can use your gait, or they can use your voice or your eye, or whatever they're gonna invent in a couple of years. They're gonna use your hair. I don't know what they're gonna do. Yeah, maybe not yours, but like maybe Leila's, mine maybe also not. But yeah, it's the same. So it is. I don't know what exactly you read about not being part of anything, but like if we talk in the sense of what AI Act, so this big regulation that's now in place in Europe. These biometric data and biometric systems are are used in different contexts. So if it's used by the the migration control or by the police, none of this is protected. So they can use your gait to identify you or your face or whatever. So this is the issue that we are also discussing, that certain uses of certain tools are being regulated, but the uses that are the most dangerous and the most probably faulty, because what happens if you, I don't know, break your leg? Are you going to be walking differently? Are you going to be matched with somebody else? We don't know. They don't know, but they're still going to use this tool. So this is something that, yeah, we need to be questioning. And I think the real danger there is that these uses are not going to be regulated. So there's going to be a lot of errors, what they were just saying, and then a lot more problems. So I hope we answered your question, but if you have something else to add, go ahead.
Okay, then maybe one question from my side. Jasmina asked me not to have a question, but I will have one. I think that if we want that somehow this technology and usage of this technology will be under the control, we need the proper regulation, and we need somehow the civil control on how to use this, how the technology is used. And you mentioned before that connection of civil society on the Europe level is needed somehow. I totally agree with that. But I am from the economy, and when we have some ideas, we always ask us how to implement these ideas. Do you have any ideas how to organize this civil society, how to do this? Thank you.
That's the question. I mean, we are I'm not saying at the beginning, because we are not. For example, this is already an answer, like we doing this kind of meetings in Brussels, in Paris, in Rome, in Ljubljana. It's already a step to try to understand how to organize ourselves, and in the same time doing what we are doing on our national level, trying to, I don't know, for example, we have, as like the Italian group, at the beginning we work alone. Now we have a network. The network work with European level, and we try to speak with the authorities to suggest which kind of authority could be the best one, the best watchdog on the regulation. I mean, we have to try step by step. I don't think there is only a good question, but already like this moment is already a first step to try to organize civil society. So this is what I think is step by step. I know we have to run, not to walk, because hyper production. But at least we are trying to find a way to also to understand how which way is the best to organize. I don't know if you agree, if you have something else to say.
I personally totally agree.
It's easy like that.
No, the other thing, what I already said before, is the question of make people speak about it, take away the fear. And I think that's the biggest problem. But also, we as a civil society really need to consider how we, for example, approach journalists or politicians. Because when it's about these topics, you need to be kind of also a bit of a servant's agency and try to give some super technical or legal information, definitions. And we really see it when we talk about a complicated topic as a civil society organization. When it's about AI, we have people with a tech background, people with a legal background, and we always think about how can we break it down so it's appropriate for a journalist, for a politician in this field, for the people on the street. And that's a constant thing that needs to keep on happening, and that takes a lot of our time away, actually. And that's super hard to reach the people with these topics. And in the end, we are also up with some organizations that at the moment make a lot of money with that. That's really something to consider. So you need to be super creative and need to speak out and be super annoying and consider that those people with a lot of money maybe, and it happened to me, it happened to us that we had an appointment in the ministry, and just before us there was a really high-ranking policy advisor for a big tech firm. They walked in just before us. So we really need to think about how can we make this whole topics really palatable. So put in the hours, to be honest. So we always say what we do quite often is lobbying for the good cause, financed by civil society.
I would just add another thing to this. I think we need to also try different approaches. I think we're the strongest when we like do many things, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because we don't have an exact answer. Oh, this thing is actually working, so we should all focus on this. I think it's about writing the stuff, doing the research, lobbying, having meetings with decision makers, breaking down stuff for public, going into schools, raising awareness, making TikTok videos about it, even though we hate it, and using the big platform. So all this is like maybe then slowly we're gonna figure out which one is working, which one is not. So.
Briefly highlight the discrepancy you've just described. So we're doing all of that, right? The implementation guys or the people that are pro-biometric surveillance, they're not doing anything. They're just coming in saying biometric rules and it's getting installed all the way. There's no test of success rates. There's no relationship with the court cases where biometric evidence is being used to prosecute someone. Is just there and it's being used, and we're doing all of that. I mean, it's just you've beautifully described what I've been thinking what I've been thinking about through the whole discussion. There's no proof that it works, and there's no proof that stuff is getting better because of it. We're doing everything we can to prove them wrong, even though there's no proof to begin with. And it's like, they told me not to curse, but, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's a difficult situation, and that's why you need strategic litigation, because quite often those guys who implement it, they have the pressure from somewhere. They also have pressure from the society to make it safer, and they do whatever. So at least they show they're doing something. So it's some kind of action. So that's why you need to deliver a lot of information saying, oh, maybe there's another course of action, or pointing out the mistakes and making them aware. And then afterwards go to the authorities and challenge it. The problem is, quite often, if you challenge it, it takes years. Maybe they're going to drag it out to the Court of Justice, to the Court of European Rights. And then you look down at 5, 6, 7 years and a lot of money. That's not easy. For us as a civil society organization, we're a small one, we really have to consider when we do strategic litigation, because it's very, very expensive. Yeah. So, and the other thing is, quite often you can miss the time frame. So the people become aware too late that you can even go to the courts. So that's another topic that you always have to do some reach out, talk to people about it, make them aware of the cases. So maybe you can reuse it in another instance. But I'm totally with you. There will be the push from a lot of implementation guys, and they will do it. And they are not really caring at the moment. So we really have to make it more difficult for them. And that's the outreach part. Otherwise, there's not a real solution, because the thing is, there's not one. I don't see a political party, for example, on the European level that's just plainly saying, oh, let's talk about biometric surveillance. Nobody's using it as a talking point. They're either too afraid, or they think it's too complicated, or we can only reach 5% of the people, so we're not going to do it because it doesn't matter for elections.
a question on what you just said when you were talking about, for instance, the lack of political parties in Europe addressing this issue. And before we were talking about fear, why people do not address this issue. But is it really fear or is it disinterest? Because the implementation guys, as you put it, are implementing and they're not really doing much about it. They're not opening a public discussion because they don't need to, because they're implementing. And on the other hand, maybe the implementation guys see a lack of interest in the civil society or in society as a whole. So maybe instead of working more on monitoring, on giving ideas on how to frame a legal framework about use, why not invest more effort into spreading it? Because maybe a lack of interest is the problem.
Spreading what? Sorry. Spreading the interest. Yeah, I mean, that's what we try to do, and it sometimes really works when you have a good case. So we really try to spread the interest, but we also see it, in the end, we need some proper legal guidelines. Without some proper legal groundings, a lot of, state organizations will do whatever that seems like activism in that field. That's why we really hoped for the AI Act, because the AI Act had the idea that some sort of uses of biometrical surveillance would be prohibited or at least high risk. So we have some risk management procedures. And the thing is, what happened, they put in some exemptions. And the exemptions were exactly for law enforcement, for the state. So it's absurd that the state said actually, okay, we're going to do something for you, this society, and it will be the AI Act, and it will be amazing. And you already had the rich tech guys, with the AI Act, we are not able to have innovation, which is, of course, like nonsense. And then in the end, the state said, but it's not going to work for us. So I think that's a really difficult situation, because you would have a legal solution for it, but suddenly the state said, but it's not going to work on us. And to me, it seems they did it a bit on purpose, because it makes it even harder to talk about it. Because now you have to talk about the intricacies of national security exemptions of the AI Act, and then you have different interpretations of it. And talking about it makes it happen that before that, as a whole of the society, maybe reach 10, 15%. But if you talk on that level, you reach, 1% of the society. So I think that's also the difficult thing, that the European Union had a chance to properly do it, to properly regulate it, and to screw it up. And now we are here with the situation, thinking about it, how can we make it right? And the only solution would be to go through the courts, to talk about the national security exemption, to go to the European Court of Justice, but it will take a lot of time. And in this time frame, we will have totally new uses of AI that will be even more invasive. So it's an uphill struggle, but I think you have to point it out, because I don't see it from a pessimism point of view. I see it more as, we totally know what we want. We know maybe it's hard, but you can do it.
Yeah, and you have also to take in consideration that the parliament that approved the first draft moved in a direction. The problems are the governments. We have to understand how European Union works, like it was the previous parliament that tried to ban some stuff. At least they tried to figure it out. They were at least a little bit listening to the civil society. The problem were the states, the governments. They have like this system of voting that imposed all this like moratorium, and with like all the lack, for me, one of the most complicated, urgent thing is that not only national security, but cyber warfare is completely outside the AI Act. And with what we are seeing in the use by Israel in Gaza, but also in the Ukraine-Russian war, they are both using AI weapons. We need a regulation on it. And it's really complicated to get also the civil, not the civil society in the sense of like organization, like normal citizens. Sometimes they told you, I have other problems, I have a housing problem, so I don't care if they collect my data. And we have to find a strategy to make people to understand that everything is interconnected. I don't have a work, I don't have a job, I don't have the resident permit, I don't have the citizenship, I don't give a shit about, sorry for the word, but I don't care about they are like spying me. But it's all interconnected. We don't know how to make sexy, okay, data protection, but in the other things, we have big tech that makes sexy, sell them our data. So it's really an unbalanced war, and in the same time, we have political parties, speaking from the point of view of my country, also the left party, it's not like open to data protection, especially at the national level. It was a little bit more at the open at the European level. This is also something that's really complicated. We have to figure it out. I mean, we don't have to be so pessimistic, or, I mean, no? At least let's try.
So just one more thought on the whole organizing a civic society and ignoring the fact that we're living in representative democracies, right? And we have people that we've elected and we've gave up part of our powers for them to represent us, right? So during the pandemic, you had a very vocal and very active and very organized community called anti-vaxxers, right? And it just, thank God, the politicians didn't listen to them, right? So talking and banking everything on the civic society, whatever that means, I don't think it's a way to go. I think we have to work on it from a systemic point of view and try to develop not necessarily a mass organization of organized civic society players, because A, it's exhausting, B, nobody's getting paid for anything, and C, it takes too effing long. But we have to focus on the quality of the debate and on the representatives of on our political representatives, on the mass media, and on structures that are guiding our society, right? Because, going back to here's how you protect yourself against biometric surveillance, it wasn't funny in 2015, it's not funny today, right? Plus you have, in Ljubljana, on Faculty of Information Studies, you have guys developing biometric surveillance that is based on ears. So supposedly earlobes are very sexy, also for biometric surveillance, and we each have, they have a very high identification success based on just earlobes. So I don't think we're going to win this on debating whatever. I think we have to focus on success rate in the field and working through institutions and representatives of the institutions that are there to sort of argue for our cause, right?
I kind of agree with you, but I also a bit disagree. Because we also have the systemic point of view, and that's also what we do. As I said, we talk with a lot of politicians, we talk a lot of academics as well, and our goal is also deliver input that's maybe as unbiased as it can be, because you have to consider a lot of information that reaches politicians at the moment is paid for. Somebody has an interest to implement biometric surveillance, and they don't have the data if it works or not, but you can at least say I did it, and also there's somebody with interest and they're gonna pay taxes. So the thing is, quite often we see it that we get an easier appointment with a politician if we have a really good case in the courts, or if we talk to the media and raise some concerns and suddenly are in the news. But quite often it's also because a lot of people complain on the street. That daily thing when you meet a politician and they say, oh my God, that's horrible. And we really saw it. We went to for example, to call-in shows on the Austrian National Radio. You sit there with the moderator and people from all of society call you. And it's really interesting, because quite often I want to talk about systemic issues, but they were like, no, I'm not interested. What can I do to protect myself? And I think it's idiotic what they're doing. And it's already enough that people say on the street, like an old grandmother. I had an old grandfather who called me, and he said, oh my God, that's horrible. I'm going to tell my member of parliament. And you need that, because if they're not reaching any information that people dislike it, there won't be any change. Because if politicians don't feel the pain, they're not going to act.
Yeah, I'll just say that this is going to be our last question because we don't want to keep you too long. We're going to do this, then I'll wrap up, and yeah. So it should be a good one.
Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure. I hope I'll not complicate things with my question.
We have 4 minutes.
4 minutes. I'll be really short. I think that from the politician side of view and also from the employees in the state, different state departments, there is an active interest in this kind of technology, not only from the military and security part of the thing, but from the role of their basic role. What is the role of the state is to manage things in the society, is to manage space, economy, things like that. We want the state to have, to do the planning, for example, and to do it based on a quality data. So the gathering of data, building databases, it's the main role of the state, and to use these databases to do decision making and policies in a quality kind of manner. And this is usually how the civil society also addresses state. On what kind of data are you basing your ideas, policies, and solutions? And you need to have enough data. You need to have more data. You need to have more quality of the data. And we usually do this as I cannot say as a civil society. So how is this basic need for the state to have a lot of quality data and use it for the management and for the quality policies and also address social issues connected to this question, and how to balance both things? So this misuse of data and the basic need for the state to have a lot of data.
I think that's not only a doctoral thesis that you're asking for at the moment from a sociological, political, and legal point of view. So it's a really good question. It's a super important question, but I don't know how to answer it, even if I have 2 hours. Save me.
Yeah, let's put the racialized girl. No, I'm joking. This is, I think, the elephant in the room. I mean, because especially for an economic and welfare point of view, with the lack of data, you cannot maybe also organize solutions. Maybe we should at least learn from the mistakes of the others. Like maybe the Dutch system, it's not the best way to collect data to improve welfare project. This is maybe first something that we can do. And I think that it's more from like a technical point of view, not only how you collect, but the use, you know. Maybe in some cases you can have anonymous data. I don't know, I'm just like thinking out loudly. It's like sometimes also in some cases you need to know the age, the gender, the ethnic, but in the same case you are at risk to know the gender, and I don't know. I mean, this is the data scientist has to find out a solution, and maybe they should start studying ethics, so they may be trying to build a technology which is on an ethic point of view. I don't think this is an answer. I mean, this is not a question and an answer for civil society. It's for the technician. I mean, they have to be more ethical. You have to understand that what they are doing, it's like a tool, and it can be used in a way or in another. Maybe. That's my point of view.
And at the moment, our constitutional court in Austria is quite often tackling exactly that kind of question in different shapes or forms, because even if you use maybe anonymized data, you can use it for uses of data, practices of data that could be unconstitutional. And I think it's going to stick with us because, of course, you have the advantage now, you have more data, more information, you can be more effective. But that, of course, creates legal, ethical, sociological questions. And I think we shouldn't be afraid about it to discuss these questions. I think it's nothing bad. Of course, I see the need, but I also see the need maybe for privacy or not use it. And that's the question of proportionality that comes down to our legal system. So I think we will ask ourselves these questions a lot of times in the next years, and we're not going to stop. And there's not one answer, because it always depends
I would also like just to add to this discussion, the question which the state should ask itself first is, do I need data and which data I really need? Because state is wishing to collect all the data possible. And you should think first and discuss publicly if you really need this data. Maria Theresia needed data for cadastre, very useful, But she thought carefully which data she needed at that time. And the same question is still very, very relevant today. Do I really need data, and for what purpose do I need this data? And if we publicly discuss this, many questions about the abuse of data would not be even actual, because we would not collect this data at all. But states are today wishing to collect all the data possible because maybe sometimes I will need this, or I would be interested to look in them, or probably it should be possible really to abuse them,
I think that's a great answer and great conclusion. I'll thank Leila and Sebastian for being here with me. And I hope this discussion today at least helped to highlight some issues regarding biometric surveillance. I know it's a very broad, very difficult area, but we have to be talking about it. And I would just like to conclude about the situation in Slovenia, even though we currently are not in this big mess that our neighboring countries are, but we are kind of following the trend very quickly. So, for example, Slovenia recently purchased a post-remote biometric identification tool. What Leila explained before is a tool that's used on the video and all the existing pictures to identify people. We bought this from a notorious French company, Idemia. We don't have currently enough information how the tool is going to be used, but it will start to be used supposedly next year. And because of all this, we think it's crucial for us to work on prevention of such horrible scenarios. And this is why at Danes je nov dan we prepared some recommendation for the state and for the decision makers to prevent such horrible scenarios. We did discuss a bit AI Act, the regulation on the EU level, but the important thing to understand here is that it has complete exclusion for national security, and it has some certain exclusions for areas of law enforcement, border migration, and policing. So these are the things that we think Slovenia should be covering in a national either legislation or national protocols, recommendations, ways of working. We think that Slovenia should therefore to fill this gap, prepare a resolution how to use artificial intelligence systems, because it's ridiculous to think that they're not going to use it, because they will. So we need to prepare a resolution or a protocol how to use these tools to be actually protecting the rights. And we need, like on the national level, we need to have a discussion what national security actually is, because there's quickly like the passing between national security and policing. So some issues that we think is currently policing can quickly become national security and then be completely exempt from any oversight, any rules. Slovenia should also consider more restrictive measures on these areas of policing, which they have some prohibited practices, but they have like certain exemptions. So what we were discussing before, the live facial recognition is not allowed, but the post facial recognition is allowed in certain cases. There are many like, if this and this and this is true, then it can be used. So these things are very like vague, and they can be quickly like molded into whatever needs to be done. We think there needs to be some certain rules on the national level how to use these tools. There's also a need for like more oversight. So we think all these tools should be publicly known that they are being used, so in a public transparency register, so the civil society, everybody knows this is being used, so we can keep our eyes on that. And of course, there shouldn't be any exemptions for people to be notified that these tools were used on them, because currently AI Act is saying police does not need to notify you if like certain tools were used, so there are some decisions being made that with automated decision making, we think people should know about this. And the last thing that we recommend is there are some like security measures that the court needs to permit police to use certain tools, but this is always done after the fact. So police already used something and then the court can say, oh, but you're not allowed. The protocol, how this is done is not very clear, so we also think that Slovenia should be very clear on this. You should follow these and these and these and these steps. And also in cases when court says this was an unlawful use of the tool, what is then the national procedure there? So, because we know that it can quickly, the data can be gathered in certain ways and then still being used in certain processes. So we publish these recommendations today on our website. We also send them to the relevant ministry, so the Ministry for Defense, for Internal Affairs, for Digital Transformation, for Justice, and to the government. And we're here always for them to approach us and have more discussions on this. And of course, we're going to try to write more about this, so you can sign up to our newsletter, like my comms guy is very happy now that I said this. We write more about these topics there, and yeah, we're looking forward to having more discussions like this in the future. So yeah. I need to now also announce that we are having some food and drinks after this, so you are all welcome to stay, have some nice burek. After we put the burek here. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you all.